Becky Keller is going to provide our message today, and I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say, and I'm sure you are too.
Let us pray. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. My question for you today is, how often in daily conversation do you use the word thy or thine? And I've been asking this for a couple of weeks, and I'm reminding everyone that that's how we say the Lord's Prayer. And we sometimes then wonder why church doesn't feel relevant to the 21st century. I did a little research on this, and the King James Version of the Bible was in 1611 or something, and that's the only version that's still using thy or thine. Even the Revised King James is not using thy or thine. So just some words of wisdom to start off the day. I actually do use thy once in a while because it comes up in my word puzzles. I'm going to use this forum to share some things that have been happening with the Church Council the last 6 months. I've actually kind of waited for an opportunity to speak, and since Pastor was going to be gone all week, I volunteered. I'm also going to use some things from the Synod Assembly that I attended in June. We used this program, Living the Called Life Today, was part of some breakout sessions on Friday afternoon of Synod. John was there, but he didn't get to be part of this. Pastor had a migraine, so she didn't get to be part of it. And so I kind of struggled through by myself. It's complicated, but it's wonderful material. It just takes some time to think about. I'm also going to give a disclaimer. Everything I say this morning are my words, not necessarily the church council, certainly not the pastors, and probably none of you will really agree with me because I have got crazy ideas. So I just want you all to understand that. All right, the first question in this book about living the called life was directed to congregations. And we were asked what the gifts, passions, ministry experiences, contextual realities, blah, 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 mark your congregation and make God's call particular to this congregation. And as I thought about that, I thought probably the most important part of our church is our heritage. A rich German heritage. We've been here for now, I think, is it 155 years? And we had an interesting experience this week. We've been cleaning the church and going through closets and cupboards and shelves and trying to get things organized, and we're finding really exciting things. Well, if you walked through the fellowship hall this morning, you know that we emptied the mechanical room and left a mess. One of the things we found was this hanging. It's in German. I'm not going to attempt to read it, but someone thoughtfully pinned at the bottom, "Who hears you hears me." And that's actually a verse from Luke. I think it's Luke 10, part of verse 16. So this is part of our heritage. Why is it hidden away in the mechanical room? I've got an idea of a place we can put it. Another thing we found were two pipes. And again, they were labeled from the pipe organ installed in 1915 and removed in January of 1950. So there's two of those. There's another one out on the shelf to the right of the banner out there. That's just some of the stuff we found in that room. I think it must have been like the clowns coming out of the Volkswagen in a circus, because when we walked in Thursday morning, there were 5 of us here to work, and Deb had she'd already filled 2 or 3 tables, and that was just the beginning. That was just what she took off a few shelves. Unbelievable. One of the other exciting finds was some church plates. They're out on the table. But we didn't find a few church plates or 1 box of church plates. We found 5 boxes packed very carefully, probably just as they came from the company that made them, shoved in the back of that. There's some big wide closets in the back of that room. So please help yourself to a church plate or 2 or 3 as you leave today. It's unfortunate we didn't know they were here when we had our big anniversary celebration, but nevertheless, we have them and we would love to share them. There's also some note paper with the picture of the church on the front, more than we'll ever use in the office or the council, so feel free to take some of those. So that was my thoughts on the first activity we did. The second activity asks us to make a list of the people, communities, ideas, and voices that influence your congregation's discerning and ministry at this present time. And again, we filled out little charts, numbered things around here. And I talked about tradition again, and I sat with a gal from a neighboring church, and she and I had pretty much the same answer. We're resistant to change. That's a voice I hear. For example, we recently ordered new devotional booklets. And, of course, some very lovely person said, I don't like those. Well, that's fine. You don't have to like them. I have questioned for years why we were using a publication from another denomination, one that's really not very friendly to our own. They would not even allow us to take communion in their church. But we've been buying their publication probably forever. So I questioned that. And then I looked, because I have taken both this one and another one that the ELCA publishes, and I looked up pricing, and it was a no-brainer. ELCA was cheaper. We're going to try this for a year. If you really don't like them, we'll go back to the old ones, but I thought it was worth a change. We also changed the way we do envelopes, and again, this was a monetary reason. We were paying $120 a month to mail those envelopes, and as you all know, postage just went up. So we're now getting them in bulk and handing them out. If you haven't picked up your envelopes, I've got more for you. Some of the other changes we've made, we bought a dishwasher for the kitchen. There was some designated money, and the sanitizer has lived a good life. It's time for a change. We've just finished renovating the bathroom in the office. Got to do a little more decorating in there. And if you'd ever been in there, it was, first of all, ugly. Secondly, it didn't work. So it was used for storage, and again, the stuff that came out of that little tiny bathroom. So we're making, hopefully, a positive change. And remember, we may have some money issues, but we also have been blessed with a very, very large memorial grant, so we can justify some of these expenses that way. We've upgraded our software, and it's allowed us to easily look at the records. Somewhere it is listed that we have 555 baptized members in this congregation, and I have questioned that. Well, it seems that in this software we were entering every preschool family and all of the kids in the family and the parents, every visitor that darkened our door, and everybody who's been in this church for 25 or 30 years. I don't know how long they've used that software. So we've not weeded. We have archived some records. No one has been purged from the rolls, but we've archived records to make them more user-friendly. These are the real numbers of people that we have coming to church. The third question was about our church's vocations. What do we do? We have many and varied vocations, and through these we answer our call to ministry. That was our best one. All these little dots are things that we do. We have a good worship service. We have a wonderful music program. We do fellowship. We do preschool. We have a prayer group. We open up our church to blood donors and the voters. We take meals to the PADS shelter. We do noisy offerings, on and on and on. We do well with that. Could we do more? Probably. But I felt that was one of our strengths. Then we were asked to think about the critical concerns that significantly impact your congregation's call to engage in ministry. And they said pick the 5 most challenging. Well, number 1, look around, would be attendance. And I know this is not unique to our church. The pandemic caused us to lose a few, but more importantly, we are an aging congregation, and some people can't be here. And some people have found that there are other things to do on Sunday mornings. And again, is the fact that we're still saying thy and thine confusing people? Do we need to look at doing something more relevant to today's world? I don't know. The second concern was lack of engagement, and I'm going to talk about that more. We talked about the age of our members, the aging members. We need to meet those needs, but if we spend all of our time in care for the older people, are we then not doing the youth programs that we need to be doing? Because we don't have young people. I was hoping maybe Corey'd be here today because I did have a little bit of a children's message. But, it's a couple of our council members that occasionally bring their kids, or some of you bring your grandchildren, and that's about all we ever see in church on Sunday morning. Our offerings are dwindling. Our weekly offerings are dwindling. We're fortunate that we have a cheap pastor, and I don't mean that to be derogatory. But as a second career person, she doesn't need the benefits we would have to provide to someone that was still not able to draw a pension, so forth. I think you need to be aware that with the standards of the churches now, this church will probably never be able to afford a full-time pastor. So cherish what we have. Maybe things will change, but I've looked at the numbers and I know what the reality is. All right, my biggest frustration, and this one really bothers me. And it's a big change from when I started coming to this church 20 years ago. There's a handful of people who are doing everything. Most of you are sitting here this morning. For August, we have 5 jobs each Sunday for church. There is not one blank filled in. Now, I'm sorry. I'm pretty busy with this job as council president. Never did I imagine how engaging it would be. I'm not going to personally call and beg you to, I hate making phone calls, to do this. But I'm going to ask you to consider. One job is being usher. I started this morning. John took over. Thank you very much, John. Oftentimes somebody does. Another is setting up communion. We have someone who's setting up communion. It's no big deal. Unless we do the little cups around the rail, which some of you really like. But it takes at least 30 minutes to set it up and probably almost an hour to wash the dishes and clean it up and put everything away. Again, we'd love to have some help just cleaning up communion. If it's a morning like today, you'll be done in 5 minutes. Time you get the cabinet unlocked, wash out the cups, it's over. Another thing we need help with is serving communion. If you are able to take communion, you are able to serve communion. And I think there's maybe now, talk to Nick into it, 4 of us that occasionally will serve communion, maybe 5. The other job is counting money. Some days it's not too hard because we don't have a lot. But it is a process. But there's paperwork that helps you. There are people that will help you. I have never done it and not gotten through it, everything balanced the first time through. But it's doable. It's probably one of the more challenging jobs. But it can be done. And you wouldn't have to do it by yourself. So those are my biggest concerns about our congregation. And I hope that you'll think about that. I'm going to move on just a little bit more. I've mentioned the financial situation here. We're very blessed in many ways, and we've laughed about this at council. For the first time in many, many, many years, we have some money. don't have any people, but we've got money. And now the decision is, and this came up at the last council meeting, what happens when we have to close the church? What happens to this building? So do we continue to pour money into the building? I look around, that carpeting back there that's stained, do we clean it? Do we replace it? Or do we live with it because the building might close? We have a preschool program. Frankly, it's costing us money, but it's faith-based. It's been a mission in this church for a long time. But how much money do we continue to invest in it when the school is now offering 3 classrooms full? Difficult decision. One I don't want to make by myself. And I'm not sure. Well, the council thinks they want to make some of these, but it's going to be tough. Now, the second part of our synod session, and this was really only a short afternoon, was about your personal call. Well, I was going to ask Corey if she were here this morning what she wanted to be when she grew up, because it's really what this is about, or any other child that would have been here this morning. She's just one of the more faithful. I'm still trying to determine my call, but I do know that each of us have gifts and talents. And if you remember, Don Sawicki was really big on that, of doing he wanted us all to take surveys. And it's important because we are a community. And some of you have the gift of cooking. So you're the people we call on to prepare food. Some of you have the gift of music. So you are singing in the choir. Some of you have gifts that you are not using. And that's what I want you to think about. God gave you these talents, and you're part of this community of believers. How are you going to share your gifts? I want all of you to go home and think about it. You have many vocations. Some of you were mothers, some of you were teachers, many of you were farmers. But you also have vocations as church members, as community members, as husband, wife, son or daughter, whatever. And all of those are challenging roles. But God is also calling you to church, and he's calling you to do a little bit more. I fully am aware that we have some older people here who physically cannot do these jobs. And I understand that. But could you pray for us? I think all of you could do that. But if you're able-bodied, could you sign up one time to usher or count offering or serve communion? If you're too uncomfortable with that, would you be willing to do yard work? It seems to be never-ending. We've been trimming trees the last couple of weeks. Building maintenance. It's kind of fun to dig out these old closets and see what you find. Would you take communion to shut-ins? Would you sing in the choir? Could you make food for the PADS shelter or a funeral or even a neighbor in need? Would you like to join the knitting group, teach Sunday school? We have one person teaching Sunday school to all of our children with one helper who is not even a parent. And she cannot even get parents to come in and just help with the Sunday school kids. Bible school was run with a very small group of adults, lots of teenagers, but young teenagers helping. And sometimes they require supervision too. We really need some adults to work with the young people in our church. Would you like, maybe I said this, sing in the choir. You could volunteer at the food pantry. You could go visit people, send cards to people. The possibilities are endless. What is God calling you to do today? Amen.